thought you found the answer on the magic carpet ride last night. But when you wake up in the morning, the world still gets you uptight. Well, there's nothing that you ain't tried to fill the emptiness inside. But when you come back down, girl, you still ain't feeling right. Well, don't it feel like kicks just keep getting harder to find? And all your kicks ain't bringing you peace of mind. Before you find out it's too late, girl, you better get straight. But not with kicks, you just need help, girl.
Alright, Thrill Seekers, that was the old Paul Revere and the Raiders song, Kicks. So, yesterday I talked about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and today I'm going to talk about Dogen's 4 abodes of mindfulness. It's the same thing, and I like to make these videos, and my books for that matter, to be like TV shows were in the old days. You know, like you didn't have to watch every episode of Gilligan's Island or Married with Children or Scrubs, you know, in sequence to know what was going on, and you don't have to do that with my videos. But if you want to get a sort of more fuller picture of what I'm talking about in this video, then go back and watch the video that I put up yesterday, which was called The 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. In that video, I gave you the kind of standard, sort of more straightforward version of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, because somebody asked me to do that. What I would like to do today is talk to you about what Dogen says in Shobo Genzo about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which in this translation is called the 4 abodes of mindfulness, and it seems to be kind of a standard translation in English to call it the 4 abodes when we're talking about Dogen's version instead of foundations, but it's basically the same thing. So in order to prepare for this video, I actually, and just to show you I do work on these videos, I read all 4 versions that I could find of the English translations of this. So that means the version that appears in Book 4 of the Nishijima Cross translation of Shobo Genzo, the one that appears in Book 2 of Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. This is translated by Tanahashi et al. I believe this is now available in a single volume version. This is published by Shambhala. The 2 versions I just showed you are still in print and available at well, the first one is available only online, I think only really from Amazon. This one is available from online and from bookstores everywhere, I suppose. I also read this version, which I have as a printout. The printout is actually really hard to find, but you can find it very easily online. It's the Hubert Neerman translation, and his version calls it the 4 abodes of reflection rather than mentioning mindfulness at all. I should mention that Tanahashi et al. Call their version the 37 Wings of Enlightenment. So theirs is the Hooters version, I guess. The 37 Wings of Enlightenment. I don't know where they get wings from, but there you go. And I also read this. This one's impossible to find. If you find it, you have done the impossible. It is the Nishiyama and Stevens version, and it is in volume 2 of their version, and they give it the Japanese title Sanju Shichibon Bodai Bumpo, the 37 conditions favorable to enlightenment. That's what they call it. As usual, the differences between these versions is that the Nishijima Cross version presents you a very straightforward version that's almost a direct translation, about as direct as you can get from the Japanese. Tanahashi et al. Version I found to be actually more difficult in its own way than the Nishijima Cross version. Often the Tanahashi versions are very interpretive and therefore easier to read than the Nishijima versions. In this case, I found it more difficult to read than the Nishijima Cross version. So there you go. exception that proves the rule, I don't know. The Nishiyama-Stevens version, which you'll never find anyway, is highly interpretive, much more readable, much more easily readable, not too far off from the Nishijima cross version in this case, so that one's nice. And the most readable version, and actually the easiest one for you to find, it's probably right at your fingertips. If I can find it, I will leave a link in the description below this video. If you don't find a link, it means I couldn't find it. But if I can find it, I'll leave a link, because it last time I looked, which was 4 or 5 years ago, it was available online. This is the Hubert Neerman version. Sorry, I'm holding it backwards. This is the Hubert Neerman version, which I was holding backwards. The 4 Abodes of Reflection, and this one is much more readable than any of the others, but it's highly interpretive. I feel like, and this is just my guess, they probably, their interpretation is probably right, but they add a lot of extra words to try to kind of help you through the weirdness of it all. So, you know, you're getting a lot of extra in this version that Dogen didn't actually write, in kind of mixed in between. So they don't add extra lines, but they make all the lines kind of longer than Dogen wrote them by adding explanation in there to kind of help you get through it. So it makes it more readable, but, you know, it's their words and not Dogen's words. So there you go. So, but what do they say? I'm going to go with my teacher's version because, you know, I'm loyal to him. And so let me read you what he says. First off, he gives the 4 abodes of mindfulness slightly differently from the version that I read you yesterday. So let me read you the way he read them. He's probably grabbing them from a different tradition, you know, whatever tradition that he received, but they're pretty close. They're recognizably the same thing. So here's what he says. The first is the reflection that the body is not pure. The second is the reflection that feeling is suffering. The third is the reflection that mind is without constancy. The fourth is the reflection that dharmas are without self. So I'm just going to try to get through the first 2 this time, and hopefully we'll get through them because he comments pretty extensively on each of these. So let me see what we can do with them. Now, I'm not going to reiterate what I said yesterday. I'm just going to dive into Dogen because I'm afraid this is going to be really long if I try to do anything extra. So I hope you'll just keep in mind what I said yesterday, and we're going to dive into Dogen. So here's what Dogen says. The reflection that the body is not pure. Now, in just to do what I said I wasn't going to do, in the standard version, we're just talking about the body as the body, like what we all know and love as the body. The body is my head and my toes and my ears and my nose. Okay, that's the standard version. What does Dogen do with it? Okay, he starts off right away putting us into a whole other realm. The individual bag of skin reflected as a body in the present is the whole universe in 10 directions. So we're not even talking about the human body as we know and love it with my eyes and my ears and my nose and my toes. The human body, the body is not pure. In Dogen's terminology is everything, the entire universe. I am going to say we're talking about the material universe basically, but he doesn't even limit it to that specifically, so, you know, take that as you will. He goes on to say, because it is the real body, it is the reflection that the body is not pure springing up on the road of vivid action. So in action, the reflection, the understanding that the body is not pure springs up. If not for springing up, reflection would be impossible. The reflection, the understanding, and the springing up of that understanding are one and the same. Okay? It would be as if the body did not exist. And remember, body means the entire universe. Action itself would be impossible. The act of preaching would be impossible. The act of reflection would be impossible. But in fact, the realization of realized reflection is already present. Remember, it is the realized state of vivid springing up. What has been called realized reflection is everyday actions, sweeping the ground and sweeping the floor. So the realization that he's talking about, and this is a theme that Dogen returns to again and again, is everyday actions. In our everyday actions, realization is contained. So the realization that Dogen is talking about is not some special state of realization that comes in a moment of great rapture or satori or enlightenment or a big moment. It is this moment right now is your realization. This is your realization. Your realization is this entire universe popping into existence right now, right here. That's what he's talking about. Because we sweep the ground unaware of what number moon it is, and sweep the ground and sweep the floor aware that this is just the second moon, the whole earth is as it is. Now, this is a line that gets interpreted in many ways. All four of these translations interpret it differently. Nishijima and Cross relate it to a certain koan, which I'll just leave it to you to go and look it up and see. Other translations relate it to just the first month and the second month, because in Japanese, months are counted like they don't even have names. Actually, in Dogen's time, I think months did have names, but they also had numbers. In contemporary Japanese, months just have numbers. So January is Ichigatsu, February is Nigatsu. So they're just moon 1, moon 2, moon 3, moon 4, very kind of almost generic sounding names. They don't even get names. So it's just the realization that it's January and February. And by the way, they were counting lunar months. So the second month was actually what we call March or April. So it's a spring month. So it's just regular action in the present moment, just knowing what month it is or not knowing, just being aware of mundane things. Reflection on the body is the body's reflection. It is not that by means of the body's reflection something else reflects. Reflection itself is the very moment of it. It is the superlative having arrived. When body reflection is realized, mental reflection is not at all worth groping for and is not realized. Now this I had to read like half a dozen times over the past 24 hours, and I finally feel like I got it. And he's just saying that you don't have to notice your own enlightenment. This is a theme he also comes to again and again in Shobogenzo. When he says mental reflection is not at all worth groping for, you don't have to know that you're enlightened. Enlightenment is here. Enlightenment is the whole universe as the real human body. The fact that the universe exists as it is your enlightenment. Here is your enlightenment. The fact that this universe springs out of nothing is your enlightenment. Here it is. Look at it. Thus, body reflection is Diamond Samadhi and Suramgama Samadhi. You don't really have to know what this is. It just means body reflection, the actual presence of the universe just as it is your samadhi, is your realization. Both of which are the reflection that the body is not pure. So he's going to play with this idea of purity and impurity, and we'll get to that in a second. In general, the principle of seeing the bright star in the middle of the night is expressed as the reflection that the body is not pure. The bright star in the middle of the night is a reference to Buddha's enlightenment experience, which took place in the wee hours of the morning, aka the middle of the night, when he saw a bright star. It is not a question of relative purity and impurity. The actual body is not pure. Now here's where we get into this purity and impurity stuff, which is really neat, I think. The real body is not pure. In learning and practice like this, when demons become Buddha, they utilize the demon to defeat the demon and become Buddha. So demons become Buddha by using their demonness. So evil people, or evil becomes Buddha by utilizing its own evilness to become Buddha, by realizing itself as what it is and using that to become Buddha. When Buddhas become Buddha, they utilize Buddha to aim at Buddha and become Buddha. When human beings become Buddha, they utilize the human being to regulate the human being. So using your own humanness to understand what being human is and regulate your humanness and become Buddha. We should investigate the truth that a way through exists in the utilization itself. It is like the method of washing a robe, for example. Water is dirtied by the robe, and the robe is permeated by water. So he's talking about how the water becomes dirty when you wash the robe. So the robe becomes clean, but the water becomes dirty. So he's talking about this idea of purity is a kind of idea of purity, but purity is subjective, and it flows from one spot to another. So you never realize purity in everything. The robe becomes pure, becomes clean in our eyes, but then the water becomes dirty, so you're kind of moving purity from one place to another. And then he goes on and on about purity of the robe, and it's real interesting, but I'm going to leave that for you to read because I want to get through all of this. So I'm going to skip over this and go to the next what does he call it? Abode of mindfulness, which is the reflection that feeling is suffering. So, he says, suffering is feeling. So, all feelings are suffering. All life is suffering is the standard version of the First Noble Truth. So, feeling is suffering. It is neither one's own nor from outside. It is not tangible or intangible. It is the feeling of the living body, the suffering of the living body. So just to live itself is suffering, is what he's saying. So just to live itself is suffering, is what he's saying. It means sweet, ripe melons being replaced by bitter gourds. And the word he uses for bitter, and all of the translations point this out, is ku, which is a double meaning. So bitter can mean, the word for bitter can also mean suffering, which is bitter to the skin, flesh, bones, and marrow, which is a reference to the story of Bodhidharma's disciples who became enlightened. You don't need to know that. That's just an aside. Who cares? A nerdy aside. And bitter to the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and so on. This reflection is mystical power and practice and experience which are one step ascendant. It says a mystical power that has sprung up from the intellectual sphere into the area of reality. That's what Nishijima Roshi gives as his footnote. Mystical power that springs out from the entire stem and springs out from the whole root. Thus, it has been said that living beings suffer at the same time there are suffering living beings. Living beings are beyond self and beyond others. So this is a difficult sort of mystical concept because we are neither self or other. Boy, I'm realizing I'm already getting too long in this video, and that is a really deep subject, so I'm going to skip it for now, but let's just leave that in there. At the same time, there are suffering living beings. In the end, it is impossible to deceive others, and that is also a reference to an older writing of Dogen's, which I wrote about in my book that just came out, The Other Side of Nothing. So if you want to go get that, I wrote extensively about that in the chapter One Bright Pearl. The chapter is about Dogen's chapter called One Bright Pearl, which I think I dedicated 2 or 3 chapters of The Other Side of Nothing to. So if you want to read all about what that idea of not deceiving others is, I wrote about it in there. But again, I don't want to make this video immensely long, so I'm going to skip that. Though sweet melons are totally sweet right through to their stems, and bitter gourds are totally bitter right through to the whole of their roots, suffering is not easily grasped, or groped is what it says, groped. Let's leave that. We should ask ourselves, what is suffering? And I think that's kind of the crux of it. What is suffering? And he doesn't answer that, which I think is Dogen's genius. He kind of likes to give us a question and not give us an answer. And that, I think, is kind of the crux of all of this. Dogen here is kind of putting something out that is poetic and open-ended without kind of giving us a nice, easy explanation. So the thing that I talked about yesterday, even though, as I said yesterday, I think it's good stuff and useful stuff, and I like it, and that's why I talked about it yesterday, it's easy. It's kind of straightforward. It's kind of the kind of, first level of what you're going to understand from this stuff. What Dogen is doing here is he's kind of taking it to the next level. And that next level is a kind of, and maybe it's not even the next level, maybe it's the next level, but it's kind of a poetic level where things are, it's a bit like the difference between a painting where, you know that's a tree and that's a bus and that's a naked lady. And then there are paintings that are abstract and they just kind of give you a feeling and a kind of a sense of something. So Dogen is like one of these painters who just gives you kind of a feeling and a sense of something rather than kind of like, here's the naked lady and here's the tree and here's an apple. So you kind of got to read Dogen that way. You're not going to get a kind of nice, easy, straight answer from him. But if you're willing to work with him, you're going to get something that might be a little deeper than what you get from an easy, straight answer. So, okay, those are the first two of Dogen's abodes of mindfulness, and I'm going to work on talking about the second two in my next video, so we'll do that. So for now, I'm going to quit and tell you that if you want to donate to me making more videos, especially tomorrow's video where I'll talk about the rest of this, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually my only ways of making a living, and I really appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta donate if you don't want to donate. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Okay, even though it is much warmer outside, Ziggy still refuses to come out and do a video with me. He just wants to lay here by the Christmas tree in his sunbeam and not come out with me. So here he is. All right, Ziggy, we'll see you later. All right, bye.